Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. It's me, your host, Patrick Van Straten, and I'm once again joined by Ravi Ramineni. Hi, Ravi.
Hey, Patrick, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I thought that I'd give you a proper intro this time because I neglected to do it last time, and
That's fine.
you are not a YouTube football personality. You're actually somebody who works in football. So for those of you who don't know, Ravi was essentially the guy who built the analytics operation for the Seattle Sounders. He's been working in the backroom recruitment zone for about a decade. Is that right?
Yeah, just a little over that, but yeah.
And obviously his work led to Seattle Sounders being one of the best run operations in MLS, one of the most successful operations in MLS. And now we're lucky enough to have him here, so we get an insider's view of the recruitment process as we go through this summer, which seems to be already just chaotic.
Yeah.
So
Thanks
today,
for the intro.
Oh, go on, please.
Thanks for the intro, Patrick. Glad to be here again to discuss football with you.
Well, we've got quite a bit to discuss today because we're going to look at some of the top teams in the Premier League from last season, their major needs going into the coming campaign, and really how they seem to be approaching the summer as well. We're going to take a look at City. We're going to take a look at Liverpool. There's a big move apparently in the offing for Aston Villa, who also have been one of the most active clubs in the market so far. So shall we start with Man City? It makes sense, I guess, to start at the head of the table. And the focus with Man City seems to be less on incomings than outgoings, which I suppose might be surprising to people after yet another title for them.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's an interesting times. I think we've heard a lot of rumors about Kevin De Bruyne, and now the latest one, Pep himself apparently said that Ederson might leave in this summer window, which I think is a big shift. I think with Kevin De Bruyne, if you look at the amount of time he's been playing in the last few years, it has come down. I think a lot of injuries, a lot of stops and starts to the season. But I think Ederson is someone that one of those pieces that when he's not there, the drop off at the goalkeeper position. So if you want to start there, I mean, obviously Ederson was also injured a few games this past season, and his backup Stefan Ortega played a few games. I thought he was good. I thought as a backup he did a good job, and I think if you compare them, statistically and how they are, I think with the ball at their feet, how important it is for City in their build-up and in their game model. I think Stefan Ortega is as good, or pretty close to Ederson, and he's not a big drop-off, but he does. Ederson, with Ederson, you get a streak of he is gonna take some risks and probably cause some positional errors in terms of where he positions himself. Which comes with the territory somewhat of the way he plays the game, and his positives, and will mean that there is going to be a little bit of downside. And I think with Stefan Ortega, I do think that those downsides are bigger, and which makes me wonder if he can take over the mantle full time if this was to happen. So I don't have enough confidence that he can take over that role as a starter should Ederson leave. So I do think that if this is really a real scenario, obviously we don't know, for sure. If this is a real scenario, I think they have to definitely look at what's out there that closely resembles Ederson, or Ederson plus what additional things they want. Because with Pep, that every year, every couple of years at least, he wants to do things differently. Maybe it's out of. Maybe at some level it's out of boredom. I want to win, trying to do it in a different way. So maybe it may not be an exact like for like replacement, but maybe someone slightly different might also work. So I think, if you're the scouting department and you're tasked with this task of, okay, what have we got in terms of Ederson and, Ederson adjacent type players, I think that's probably a good place to, look at first.
Yeah, and I mean Ederson was such a kind of foundational piece when Pep came in.
Yeah,
It was a real signal to the rest of the league that what he'd had, I suppose, with Neuer at Bayern had permanently changed his idea about what he wanted. Because like Valdez was good with his feet, but he was nothing like Neuer, and
Mhm.
it was such an enormous weapon for them. Now it feels like with this, look, Ederson, age-wise, you think you should get at least another couple of years out of this guy.
Yeah.
So you wonder if the calculation is transfer ban could be incoming. Transfer ban
Mhm.
could be lengthy.
Yeah,
um,
that's a
and
great point.
if you decide to roll with Ortega, like maybe he's good, but if he turns out not to be and you've got a transfer ban, then you're in serious trouble. Then you're kind of like rolling through the academy to see any kid who's over 6 foot and just saying like, can this guy go in goal for us? Because and I think that's kind of been a little bit of a trend across the board. You've heard people, obviously they brought in Savio, Savino, whatever we want to call him, coming in from Girona,
Yeah.
and there's been talk about, will De Bruyne go this summer? Will Bernardo Silva finally go this summer? Are they going to look for a long-term heir for Kyle Walker? All this sort of stuff. It feels like a lot of this is we might need to get our ducks in a row, not just for this season, but for a couple of seasons coming, just in case.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that the transfer ban thing and as you know, football clubs and even there is a lot of time, a lot of my time when I was kind of in the thick of this was
Mm-hmm.
spent in alternatives. Like it's just like what happens if this happens and then that happens? Like what if this
Mm-hmm.
player leaves and that player gets injured and this happens? And so it's like you always plan for 100 scenarios, 100 being just a random number there,
Mm-hmm.
even though you know that only 3 or 4 might happen, of those might happen, but you have to be prepared. So that makes total sense. If even if there is the slightest inkling that there might be a ban coming, or some sort of restriction coming, they are probably absolutely paranoid in terms of, okay, we need to ensure we got everything covered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there an obvious name for you on the market here? Because I mean, we've seen this week rumors linking Man City with Donnarumma, which made no sense to me at all. That one just
No,
didn't compute for me.
no,
Anybody
Donnarumma,
else?
I don't think the profile actually fits to me.
No.
I don't think, not at all. For me, I think the closest profile from my research is probably Jordan Pickford. He's
Wow.
already in the league. He's
Okay.
already in the league. He's good with his feet, and so that I think would still be a big part of the game. And I think he's probably not as risk taking as Ederson. I think he's not as intrepid. I would use the word, one of my favorite words. Not as intrepid with his how he handles the ball as Ederson, but I think that he has pretty much everything to cover the bases to take that position, and he's already been playing at this level for a long time. Starts for England, so I feel like that's one that probably fits best if for in my book.
that is a. I'm genuinely quite shocked to have heard that name because, like, look, Jordan Pickford, I think is a good keeper. Um, I do feel that he has some of the bozo gene that I think Ederson used to get. You remember in like Champions League knockouts, Ederson would,
Yeah,
I don't know, something would happen to him before the game, like one of his synapses would not fire and he would start doing mad stuff. Pickford's got a little bit of that as well, but I guess I don't think of him as being particularly, like, to me that would be a, even if you would say that he might be a version of what Ederson is, it would be a downgrade, right? Like with his feet, a pretty significant one.
I would I'd say like I mean obviously it would be I would agree with that in statement in general, but I
Mm-hmm.
think we have to also think about taking him from the setup of Everton, which is a struggling team, like struggling to stay in the Premier League,
Yeah.
and England, which is very conservative,
Mm-hmm.
and then putting him in another group among literally the best players in their positions or some of the best players in their positions, and a coach who is going to encourage him to play a certain way. I think that would I can see that probably not being that big of an issue.
Okay.
he won't be as as I said, he won't be as intrepid, as enterprising as an Ederson. But I think that might also be that he would cut out some of the errors, would take a little bit of little less flashy approach, and maybe more effective that way. But I do think that he's someone that I can see fit into the role pretty well. And then there is other names that I'm not quite sure about. Someone like Steve Mandanda, I think, is another one that's an interesting one.
He must be 40 years old now. How old is Steve Mandanda? I'm going to guess I'm going to guess he's 39. But I get it. Like, I mean, I know what you mean. These are kind of reliable. That's a reliable.
Yeah, so
very experienced goalkeeper.
Where it will fit, I think, with someone like Steve is like, okay, if they really say, we trust Stefan Ortega, but we think he is half a season away or a season away. But we need a reliable person that can take us there and who is not going to command that I be the starter for the next few years. Otherwise, I won't come to this club. So I think someone like that could be like that bridge where they get Ortega to point where if they have full trust in him, that, okay, we'll phase him in slowly, and we have something to fall back upon if he takes more time than we think. I think that's probably where I'll see.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to make it attractive for him because, like, he's at Rennes at the moment, so he and I think Salma Hayek goes to a lot of their games. So, do you want to hang out with Salma Hayek, or do you want to trade that in for the glamour of Manchester? What would you rather do? But I do think that makes sense. Like, I guess it does depend on their internal analysis of Ortega. Yeah. Should we move forward from the goalkeeper slot then? Because there's also.
Do you have any names? Like, because I do feel like this is I think scouting for City is like a really hard one because you just literally have to price out the best players of the world, and there are other keepers that we could talk about, but it's, if somebody's starting for Liverpool or at that caliber team, he's not going to move to City. Like, so we just have to ignore all of
that. To be honest with you, I find it extremely hard to assess goalkeepers without watching like a lot of them play. So I would probably struggle to find you a goalkeeper. Let me think if there's somebody obvious. You might need to come back to me on that. But they were linked for a long time with what's he called? Diogo Costa?
Oh yeah.
Or have I completely made up his surname? But with Portuguese surnames, you've got like a 1 in 3 chance.
Yeah, I that's another name that cropped up in my kind of brief analysis as well.
Okay. Well, I mean, but I get what you're saying. Like, it'd be interesting to see what a keeper like Pickford could do in a different setup. And you invest these enormous fees in defenders who can pass and midfielders who can pass. Like, you don't necessarily need every single player on the pitch to be the greatest passer in the world in their position when you've got a bunch of other guys there who are also the greatest passers in their positions. Midfield zone, I think is the obvious place to look next. I mean, yes, I think right back, sure. Yeah. I would expect to see, if not a new signing coming in, then Rico Lewis to get more minutes, because I think he had 800 last year, 900 the year before. I think he's just about 20 now. That feels like something that needs to happen soon if it's going to happen, or they need to have a succession plan. But midfield is where we've heard the most noise. Last summer, went out and got a couple of guys. I thought Kovacic was a good pickup at a good price. Mateus Nunes, I kind of hated. Still kind of hate. But this is a position, again, where we're talking about De Bruyne possibly moving on. We're talking about Bernardo Silva possibly finally getting the move that we've been talking about now for 3-4 years. There clearly is a rebuild coming down the pipeline here. Now might be a good time to bring it forward.
Yeah, and the other one is just, if you look at the amount of minutes that Rodri plays for the team, and I think that he's at the peak of his powers. He's 28, so he's still at his peak. So I think he could probably do it but you never know with one injury. You don't want to be hamstrung too much on that, especially with De Bruyne being so injury prone. Even should he stay? Even then, you were not counting him for more than maybe 30 matches or 30 90s, something like that. And they play close to 55, 60 games a season. So obviously there's definitely a place there, and it's always hard to and it's, as I said earlier, scouting or recruiting for Man City must be so hard because you have to find these unique profiles, and you already have maybe the best available profiles in your team. And now either you have to go and get the best player in your direct rival, which is probably not possible, or you're always looking at something that looks like a downgrade at any point in time until the player moves in and then makes his own. And this is where I also think that they may also not be looking at like for like replacements. I think the way they might look at it is like, I get this player is not the exact. So if you look at Kevin De Bruyne, for example, I don't know if there is a direct replacement type player for him in the market at that level, or even a slightly below his level. You almost have to think about what is the best player I can get. Let's say like a Savinho that they got, and then they also have Julian Alvarez, who hasn't been starting, who's not like a regular starter. I think he's played more minutes in the last season than in the past years, but someone like that. So it almost becomes like, well, now Julian is becoming he's going to be in the regular starting lineup. I'm going to incorporate him. So we need to get another player that is going to be number 12 or number 11, number 12 type player. So now that gives a little bit more flexibility in terms of the profile. And you can get someone that's more, that's probably like probably top at what he does, but maybe not the exact replacement of one of your players who are in the team right now.
So it's more of you would expect, rather than to say we play the same way every game and we just swap people out and try and do the same thing, we say, right, okay, well, when this guy plays, we have to just like work in a different manner because Rodri is a unique sort of player for us.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, especially with the two we mentioned, Rodri and Kevin De Bruyne, because I think there's very few players that can play that way, and you could get. I mean, the names that I can think of, again, like when I say this, you probably go like, "Wow, why are you saying this name here?" Like somebody like a Frankie De Jong. To me,
sure,
he is he's had this. He had a decent start with the Barcelona career, but obviously Barcelona has been in with the coaches and the turmoil and the organization. I don't think he's had like the last season or so. He hasn't been that key player for them. So I'm sure moving him on from there into a team like a City, that may be one who could be really close to, if you replace Kevin De Bruyne, or if he plays in the midfield instead of Kevin De Bruyne, that may actually work pretty well. But it'd be different.
Yeah, sure. Like when they were linked with Declan Rice last summer,
you
could absolutely see how that could work for them, especially as at that point they had Stones, moving forward from centre-back into midfield. You could see Rice doing that. But obviously Rice is much more of a ball carrier and a high action defender than Rodri. Like that's the other thing. Like Rodri is this defensive midfield presence who doesn't really do that much defending, except when he needs to. Suddenly he is in the right zone. That's quite a hard thing to profile for. And actually, I guess we saw that even with a player of Rodri's talent, there was that awkward period when he arrived and that defensive midfield role had been made for Fernandinho, and Rodri couldn't play it the same way. And City were really porous for about half a season. And then it worked out and they became Rodri's Man City. So I guess you could imagine similar teething problems with somebody of a different kind coming in.
Yeah. And if you look at Julian Alvarez, is a great example. But he's still very young, but he's been in City for a few years now. He was touted to be one of the biggest talents, and he still is when he came out of South America. It took him a long time to get into where now you can see, like now if somebody says, well, next year, it's likely that Julian Alvarez might start 30 matches or 35 matches for City. I think that it's not that outlandish statement, but it takes a long time. So I think whoever comes in, there's very few players that can walk in and say he's going to start in this team. I think whoever comes in will have that period. And so you're looking at what are the different skills they're going to bring, what is the age profile. If you look at City's age profile right now, they have some really young, exciting talent coming in, especially on the wing. And then they have these older guys that are, Rodri's that you speak, but then there's, your Kyle Walker and, some of the other guys are like a little bit older. So you are trying to get players in those 24, 25 age bracket that can kind of fill that are in the prime, that come in and then can, contribute.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what Man City end up doing, if anything. It'll be interesting to see how this transfer plan, how we look back on it at the end of the season after presumably some punishment might have been put in place. Should we go on to Liverpool, who I think are, unless there's something else that you want to cover on City?
I think that's good. Yeah, let's go. Let's move to Liverpool.
Okay, so Liverpool, new manager. That's the headline. And last season, Liverpool were, I mean, frankly, the fact that Klopp kept them in that title race for so long, I think is a really staggering managerial achievement, because that squad, it has lots of great parts in it, but it's really unbalanced in various areas. They obviously had a horrible injury problems. And yet Klopp managed to get them to an okay level defensively and keep the attack flying. Yeah. So loads of pieces for Slot to inherit, but some fairly big questions about at least a couple of roles here. I mean, in particular, the number 6 role, which, as we know, Liverpool were going all guns blazing to try and fix this last summer. They tried to get Caicedo, didn't happen. They tried to get Lavia, didn't happen. Now we're not hearing that much about this position for them currently. And I was a little bit surprised that Mats Wiethe went off to Brighton and didn't follow Slot to Liverpool. Maybe they just didn't think he could play at that level. Yeah. But he was fantastic in this role at Feyenoord for Slot. Huge defensive numbers, really good passing, just a great all-round midfielder for them, 24 years old. And maybe they think McAllister can do it, or maybe they've got something else up their sleeves. But would you agree with me that this is the key role?
I agree. I think McAllister could do a lot of things that Fabinho did. And I think, they're also missing some of the, obviously Thiago with an injury-riddled career at Liverpool, but he's brought something pretty unique to the team. I think McAllister could do a little bit of both, but not really at the level of one or the other in terms of just their position. And I think generally what I see is that I think their midfield overall quality, like if you take the midfield 3, I think that quality has come down since the Fabinho, Thiago times. So they are trying to, again, this is again going back to the City conversation. You're not getting like for likes. You are trying to replace players with slightly different characteristics, and are you're expecting to solve or hoping to solve the problem. Oh, between the 3, they have all the ingredients that we had from the previous midfield, and we can kind of solve it this way. I think maybe that hasn't really played out quite that way. I feel like that's so. I think McAllister for me is probably a little better being the kind of the two-way player rather than a pure 6. So I think that maybe getting somebody that's a more purely defensive midfielder would actually make McAllister shine more, or have more of reach higher level in terms of his output. So that's how I see this.
Yeah, especially because I think with Slot, we saw him at Feyenoord set up with this 4-2-3-1, and then one of the double pivot joins the attack, and you have that 3-2-4-1 or 3-2-5, however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
Well, you can see how Trent Alexander-Arnold steps into midfield from right back the way that Geertruida did. Yeah. Like that makes perfect sense. But and McAllister going into that line, you think, oh, okay, well, now we start to get maybe some of the attacking output that we saw from him during his Brighton times, where sometimes he was almost a 10, then he was an 8, doing some 6 stuff. Like it was very fluid for him. But it does just still leave this big hole. And I like Wataru Endo.
Yeah.
He's a useful player. I think that if he were to start, 27 games for Liverpool this season, that would probably not be great.
Yeah.
And if they had the money for Caicedo last summer, I kind of think they should have at least some money, presumably, for somebody this summer. And we've talked about Joao Neves recently.
Yeah.
He might be an interesting target for them. There are more high risk guys. Like I was thinking about, he's always been a favorite of mine, but Maxence Caqueret at Lyon, who's
Yeah.
24 now and somehow is still there.
Yeah.
And he's a smaller guy. He's also a bit more of an 8 because he does a lot of ball carrying, loads and loads and loads of dribbles, but big defensive actions, great passer, really great passer. And to me, it would make kind of sense to have somebody there who is comfortable shielding the back line, but can do something else if you need to play him with Endo instead of McAllister, whatever.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that that's the position to unlock the potential or the full potential of that midfield is to get that solidified at 6, and from a defensive perspective, especially with Trent, defensively we know that Trent is not like the most probably the most defensive player to play his position, and he can come into the midfield. Now there is also the rumors that Trent might. Real Madrid is interested in Trent. We talked about it a few podcasts ago. So, I think that to me is the biggest need for them. I think after that, obviously, we also I think we had it in the newsletter, Salah replacement. I think, or you guys talked in the last podcast.
Ted and I discussed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, that I think that's on everyone's mind. Is probably, if this is not his last season, maybe the next one, but they have to be thinking about a succession plan there. So that will be another big one. And I looked at, if you look at the right back situation, we talked about Trent being in a kind of a limbo. The other one, even the left back, Robertson is other side of 30 now, or just into 30s. It does seem to me that there is a lot of this could be like a very transitional season for Liverpool, with the new coach, some of the players at the end of their career phase, having to replace key pieces or having to fortify key pieces like in the midfield, central midfield. So I do see that they could solve this multiple ways, but for me the most important position would be that 6.
Yeah, I don't really know how they go into the season with the same midfield. Like, I think what you were saying before about the possession quality of that midfield steadily going down. Like, Ted and I talked a little bit about this the other day in attack with Gakpo, Nunez versus Firmino, Mane. That's a bit more of a possession drain, that front line. But I remember looking last season at the most used midfielders now versus when they had Henderson, Thiago, and Fabinho, and you're losing about 40 passes a game out of your midfield there.
Yeah.
Obviously, that decreases your ability to hold possession. It also decreases your ability to do anything with that possession. And last season, they managed to get quite a lot of juice out of playing a more direct brand of football. It was quite unusual how direct they were for a top team. But I don't know how you feel about this, but to me, it feels quite unsustainable to play. I think they were the 4th most direct team in the Premier League in the end, which for a side of that quality is highly irregular. And you think maybe you could do that for a season, but I don't think that can be a long-term plan. They're going to have to be a 60% possession side who squeezes teams and picks them apart in the final third. Like, that has to be how it works.
Yeah, I concur on that point. I think that's a one-time thing. Also, mid-season, I think, as you said, Klopp did an amazing job to get them where they are by the end of the season. Again, I don't think, as you said, that is not going to be repeatable. As that can't be the strategy, and obviously it's a different coach now. I think it's going to be more possession oriented, and so that means you want more volume of the possession from the midfielders. And I think what we saw last year was they were probably bypassing that midfield a bit because you know that you have better matchups, or your front three is more dangerous. and you want to get them the ball as soon as possible. I think that's probably what they were trying to do towards the end of last season. But I think I agree with you. It's got to be more possession based through the midfield.
One last thing before we move on to Aston Villa. Is there an obvious candidate for you at left back? Because to me, this feels like a role which globally is kind of thin at the moment. With right backs, I feel like I can name a lot of right backs who I'm a really big fan of, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're gettable. But with left backs, I think this is a hard place to recruit.
Yeah, I think what we might see is obviously in terms of they might look for like what City's done a bit. City's haven't had like a proper left back for a while too. If you like, they had Mendy, and then it's just been like they play a center back there that kind of slides in and do that type of rotation. So you almost have to look for someone that's a left back / left center back. That's that type profile that all you're saying is in my build up and in my possession, I'm just going to slide to the right where my right back will go high, and then I'm going to build with these three, and he will pretty much be like my stay-at-home left back / left center back in my build-up. I think that's probably one way to do it, is to find somebody that's maybe an athletic version of a center back that can play a left back, nominal left back role.
Okay, that's interesting. Because then I suppose, obviously as well, we've spoken recently, not an easy position to recruit either. But then maybe you think, there are guys out there like I always loved Schlotterbeck. Schlotterbeck's left-footed, isn't he? Like he'd be an interesting candidate. Suddenly my brain's gone blank on this. But maybe that would be interesting for them to move away from what was such a signature Klopp setup. When they would get so much mileage out there. I still think there's an idea that the best way for Liverpool to be Liverpool is to get loads and loads of creativity out of their fullbacks. And you're right, with Robertson 30-ish, and with Trent's future uncertain and probably better used, stepping into midfield rather than bombing down the wing, it feels like that version of Liverpool is best left in the past rather than trying to do this pale reproduction of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's going to be when I said transitional season, I think how they move from that identity to something at least slightly different. I don't think it will, as you said, I don't think they can replicate that. So you have to move to something that's more sustainable.
Agreed. So on the topic of people who are perfectly happy apparently to tear up whatever it was that got them to their current position, Aston Villa are having a very, very, very busy summer. The latest big rumour for them after getting Amadou Onana through the door is that Joao Felix could be on his way there. In outline, I get it, I suppose. Ollie Watkins is an incredibly important player for them. And if Ollie Watkins gets injured, well, I don't know. They've still got Duran. Everyone keeps saying he's going to go somewhere, but he hasn't. But you do worry a little bit for them if he were to go. And because of their financial level, they're not really a team who can afford to have a £50 million player who doesn't play if Watkins does. So getting someone who could maybe deputise at striker and play in another position, that makes sense to me. Yeah. Whether Joao Felix is that player is a bigger question. What's your feeling about this?
I think firstly with Aston Villa, it's probably one of the most interesting teams to watch in this transfer window because it's coached by Unai Emery, and who's been really good at getting these mid-table teams that are not regularly contending for titles to get into spots where they normally aren't. Like if you look at Sevilla for many years, and then Villarreal, who have never won a title in their history, wins the Europa League with him and goes to semi-finals in the Champions League the year after. And now he's at Aston Villa, and he got them into top 4 last season to get into the Champions League spots. So, and if you look at what he does, is there will be that period where they do try to get a lot of players that your first reaction is like, wow, this team is going for that player type of reaction. Like if you look at Joao Felix, like the way he came onto the field, his transfer fee was over 120 million. Went to Atletico Madrid. I never understood why. I will explain that later. But it's like, and then like, went to Barcelona, decent time, Chelsea, loans. It's been like somebody probably people, and he's only 24. Like if you think about it, and it's not like he's done in his career. So that's like a profile that they always targeted profiles that in a normal scenario, if there are no caveats like this of Joao Felix going on loans, like not having like a really steady career, he wouldn't be available for a team like Aston Villa or a Villarreal or a Sevilla. And so now they get this. So what they're really good at, I think Unai and his staff are really good at, is what is this player really good at? So I'm going to put him in a spot where he's going to just, it's like hiding all his deficiencies and trying to put, like make sure that he's going to excel in what he's really good at. And if you look at Joao Felix, like he's excellent at chance creation, shooting, really good receiving, very smart player, receiving between the lines, off the ball movement, finding runners in space, like very high in terms of all the creative metrics. Like if you look at even his time at Barcelona this last season, he's in the 95th, 99th percentile in some of these metrics. And you're talking about Barcelona, and he's whenever he played, he's been one of their key creators and created a lot of chances. For a team like Aston Villa, like think about it, like bringing this player and putting with the group in Aston Villa, that he would immediately become the best player in the team. Now, the reason why his career has been the way it's been is obviously, I think moving to it. I was shocked when he moved the first time, when his first move to Atletico Madrid with Simeone.
Yeah.
Like everything that Simeone values or adores, Joao Felix doesn't do those. Like off the ball defending, pressing, like keeping up with his man, when the ball turns over, and obviously someone as creative turns the ball over a lot, and just staying with his man and defending. Like at the first 2 years in Atletico, it was really bad. And I was like, well, this player has no future with Simeone. Why is he going there? But I just don't. Sometimes I don't understand how players evaluate that. Like they've seen Simeone's coaching for many years and how he keeps play. But I think that to me is like probably put him back in his career a few years. I think if he had gone to a team directly, like let's say if he had gone to Barcelona instead of Atletico Madrid out of Benfica, it would have been different. Or if he had gone to a United or Chelsea, or I think it would be slightly different. His career path would be very different. We're talking a different story right now. But I think those are the reasons he's available. I think for Aston Villa, they have to look at, I think he can play he has to play, he normally plays at the left wing, but then comes inside to create in the half spaces, and also the zone, basically top of the box is where he's most effective, and then runs into the box. So I think with Aston Villa, like, he can put him behind Oli Watkins, and, I think it'll be a really good setup. The only thing to worry about is if they're going to play Lucas Digne on the left side as a left wing back / left back, there might be they have to figure out defensive issues when the ball turns over. But I'm pretty sure Emery and his staff are looking at, he's going to bring so much creativity and so much elite quality in attack for us. We will live with those, the downsides of it. We'll find a way to figure that out.
Well, they've brought in Ian Maatsen as well, who obviously is not a particularly big guy, but I've never been that big a fan of Dean outside of his creative ability, I suppose. I think it'll surely be an upgrade there. Onana as well is a much more active, rangy defender than Douglas Luiz, who was previously the incumbent of that deep midfield slot.
Exactly.
So maybe the idea will be he moves over, Felix goes inside, we work something out.
Yeah. So, I think that this is kind of one of the things for teams that are not literally when you're not scouting for Man City, Real Madrid, Barcelona type teams, is that you always have to make intelligent, calculated trade-offs.
Yeah.
And I think that with what they're looking at is like, well, we'll never get this player at Aston Villa if he had no flaws. Like,
Yeah.
and so we're getting him. He's going to come with his issues, but we can figure out a plan to do this. But he's going to bring some quality. And remember, they're also playing in the Champions League this year, and Emery takes European competitions very seriously. And I think they're building this team for like a Champions League campaign where they may want to they want to get through the groups. Now I know the new group system is very different, so we'll see how all that plays out. But I think that they want to have a run in Europe. I think that's the competitions that I think he loves to show that he's one of the best coaches in the world. So I think he's setting this team up for like a lengthy run in the Champions League.
And it is a huge opportunity for them. I mean, even domestically, like as you say, Liverpool might be looking at a transitional year. Spurs have still got some work to do. United are kind of just starting a rebuild that in theory they started 3 years ago. Like there are a bunch of Chelsea, God knows, there are a bunch of teams around them who could. Villa can park themselves in this pack of teams around the edge of the Champions League places pretty securely for the next few years if they get 2 or 3 of these big moves right. And they might never have, they might be in the Champions League again next year, but they might also never have the cachet they have right now, where they've got a coach who is well respected, they've got a squad which is flying, and they've got Champions League football. I mean, it's interesting to me that I think last summer they were heavily linked with Emile Smith-Rowe from Arsenal. And to me, Joao Felix is the much, much better version of that kind of player. Receiving between the lines at the top of the box. He's kind of in the 10 zone, but he's not an on-ball 10. He's more of a runner into space and more of a goal threat. Like it feels like joined up thinking that to me.
Yeah, it is. And I think that also I would say that if you look at the past again, at Villarreal and Sevilla a few years ago, I think that there will be this phase where when they are in this kind of mode, like in this year, last year, this year, next year, they will spend a lot of money. You might see some pain at the back end of this. But again, if you're an Aston Villa or if you're a Villarreal, you're not going to have this opportunity to shine in Europe very often. Like as you just mentioned about, even with the top five, taking out Arsenal and City, the below that, there is a transitional moment for a lot of teams there, the regular strong teams. So they want to take advantage of this, which means that maybe at the back end of this, they probably have to sell a lot of players and go through some, a bit of a painful rebuild. But that's not for now. That's probably 2 years down the line. But this is kind of how they've been doing this, and this is the pattern that repeats. Like Villarreal, right after the season after Emery left, they had their biggest deficit in budget ever. But you have to say, well, yes, it's a deficit, but then you got a Europa League title, its first title for the club in the club history, and you got a Champions League semi-final where, at the start of the second half of the second leg, they were even with Liverpool. Just think about that.
Yeah.
For a club like Villarreal. So like it is what it is. I think Villa will have this really good phase right now. I think they just have to enjoy it. They just have to enjoy the ride.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, one last thing on them. In the past, we've heard that Joao Felix's wages have been kind of up in the 200k a week range. It feels like Villa can't do that. But how high do you think you could go on the price for a player like this? Because there are these red flags. And yes, that means that he is potentially gettable for you in a way that he wouldn't be otherwise. But on the other hand, it means that you don't necessarily want to spend every cent that the club has trying to get him in the door.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Obviously, they've already spent a lot of money too. I don't know, maybe somewhere 35 to 50.
Okay, okay, that's pretty good. I think if you could get him for sub 50, I think that would be great. And Villa fans will be extremely excited by this, and rightly so. Like they've like you said, they've got to enjoy the ride while they can.
Yeah, I mean, like you can't always like I always get this thing about like, well, we're building for future. We're like you hear this a lot out here in the States in baseball a lot. Yeah, we're amassing draft picks, or we're putting together like the minor league level talent, so that one day we're going to have this amazing talent and we're just going to deploy this and then going to surprise everybody. It's in reality, it doesn't work that way. Like you never know with young talent how it's going to click or not. And so you have to, at some point, you have to live in the present. And and to me, like, I think they've done really well last season, and they've signed some good players, and adding someone like Felix this year will really be, I think, for Villa, it's going to be, I mean, probably the best team they've ever assembled in recent times. And I think that's going to be fun to watch.
Definitely. And I love that we've kind of, we've gone through like now a long period of analytics slowly creeping into football, and we arrive at the same point where we're like, flags fly forever, you have to go for it. Like when you get the opportunity, you absolutely have to go for it.
Yeah, you gotta go. It's like there was like an interview, like just obviously I think Ted might have mentioned it in the past, I'm a big Villarreal fan, and there was a time when they hired it was during the COVID time, they had a chance to hire Emery. And they had a really good coach at the time, and I think the fans felt bad for him because they choose to hire Emery, even though the previous coach got them to Europa League. Javi Calleja, former player of the team as well. But I think that they had this plan, like, we got to do this. Like, we only get this opportunity once in a while, and this seems right. They had Pau Torres coming into his prime, and a few players that are like Gerard Moreno at the peak of his powers, and really like good squad. And so they said, well, we need to get a top level coach that has done this before and add a few pieces, even if it means a bit of a financial pain. They took that risk, and would you say now they've gone through the pain after Emery has left for a couple of years? I mean, I don't think there's a single fan who would say that it wasn't worth it. It's because I think the moments they lived in terms of winning the title, beating United in penalties that went to 11. I don't know if you remember De Gea missing in the 11th penalty.
It was the best.
I guess Rulli. So it's like I think there is going to be a time. I think this may be Villa's time. So I'm rooting for them.
Good to hear it. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our podcast for this week. I really enjoyed that, Ravi. Thank you. And people, please keep getting your questions in. We've had some really interesting suggestions on Twitter. We've got some other players who we want to come to at some point. We want to talk about Osterman at some stage, if that comes to anything. So please do continue to get your suggestions in, and we'll try and get to them all as we close in on the start of the season. Thank you very much. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do subscribe on your favorite podcast app, or follow us on our social media pages. Subscribe to us on YouTube, and hopefully we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Patrick. Bye.